Buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos a esta nueva edición del Becarios Knowledge Day del programa de becas de Fundación La Caixa. Estamos hoy aquí para hablar de envejecimiento y tenemos a un panel de lujo que pronto os iremos presentando. Me
And
presento
we have a
primero.
wonderful panel. Let me introduce myself. My name is Silvia Provo, and I'm going to be the moderator of this afternoon's event. I work for Ubic Media, which is a communications agency that gives support to this
Estas
scholarship
sesiones
program.
con
And
la
we have the
comunidad de
honor
becarios.
and the pleasure to share this
Sin más demora,
program with the
empezaremos a
community of
durante la próxima hora y cuarto estaremos escuchando
scholarship holders
de la que
from La Fundación La Caixa. Let's
voy
not
a dar
waste
entrada
any
a Valle
time.
Palomo. Valle Palomo
So let's start.
es
We have a very intense afternoon ahead.
asociación de becarios, pero
We
además,
have
y más importante, es la investigadora
Valle Palomo,
principal del grupo de biosensores en neurociencia
who
en el
is
IDEA de
actually the main
Nanociencia en Madrid.
researcher
Y
of
ella os dará
the
la
group
en nombre de la
of
Asociación de Becarios.
Neurosciences Sensor in Madrid.
Muchas
And
gracias,
she
Silvia.
will welcome you on behalf of the
La nueva
Association
edición
of ex-holders.
y estamos
Valle, go ahead.
la bienvenida
Welcome
de la
to
Junta
all of
de
you to this session. I'm here to welcome
Esta
you.
tarde tendremos
This
un
afternoon,
panel de
we will
lujo
have
centrado en un tema
a
que es
very
el
intense
envejecimiento. Y es un
agenda
tema que
about
la gente
aging.
conoce
This is a quite
porque
cross-sectional issue
todos
because
tenemos
ever
presente
since
desde ese momento en el que
we
nacemos
are born,
y empezamos a envejecer.
we start
Por lo
aging.
tanto,
And
el
therefore,
envejecimiento lo tenemos que entender como un
aging
proceso natural
needs
del
to be
ser humano
understood as a
y
natural
en el que
process
nosotros,
for human
nuestro grupo
beings.
social,
However, it is true that we normally associate
nuestra
it
sociedad
to certain
como persona
sectors of
con
society,
discapacidad.
or it is
Y por eso
associated to
esta tarde
pathologies. However,
queríamos
with
abordar
today's
este tema
Knowledge Day, we
desde
want to approach
diferentes
this
campos
issue
y
from
vertientes
different
de
fields
reflexión
and angles
política y
to
también
create a
para
holistic
poder
vision
brindar
and also to be able to
expertos que
value
nos aporten sus
aging,
experiencias
which
y
actually gives
también
us
poder
experience,
saber o tener esos
and also
consejos
to be able
para
to
poder
know and have advice to be able to
hablar
age
y
with the greatest
durante este
quality of
proceso
life
de envejecimiento.
in
Para ello
our
contamos
normal
con
and
6
natural
expertos en sus
aging
diferentes
process.
campos
And
que
for
van a
that, we have
explicarlo
6
en profundidad. Para
experts
empezar
from 3
tenemos
different fields.
Vania de la
We
Fuente,
start, we have
que es
Dr. Maria de la
experta
Fuente.
en envejecimiento
She
social y nos
is
hablará
an
del
independent
envejecimiento en la
consultant on
juventud y
healthy
también del tema
aging.
del edadismo, ya que
And
es una de las
also,
redactoras del Informe Mundial
she
sobre
is
Aging
one
del
of the
2020.
people who have
Luego
written the
tenemos a la
World
doctora
Report
Martín,
on
es
aging. And
economista,
then
tanto en ámbitos
Dr.
sociales
Nuria
como
Mascanal,
políticos, en
a
los que
professor of
nos hablará del
economics,
impacto de la
and she will talk
longevidad
to us
en
about
la
the
economía,
impact on
abordando un poco el
longevity in the
envejecimiento en la
economy.
sociedad
We will talk
y su
about
impacto a los diferentes niveles. Seguiremos con la
aging
doctora Itziar Vergara, que nos dará una visión de cómo
as
estudiar
an
y cómo
effect
investigar
that
el
has
envejecimiento a través de la atención primaria. Y a partir de aquí veremos cómo estudiar el envejecimiento desde campos más diversos. Como buenos investigadores o analistas, hemos contactado
actually an
con la doctora
effect on
física Ana Ferré, que nos
the economy. And then we'll hear
comentará
Itzia
cómo se
Vergara.
en el espacio o cómo se puede abordar también
And
este tema desde el espacio. Seguiremos con el doctor José María Barrachina, que nos
then
comentará y nos dirá cómo se puede medir,
we will
incluso
talk,
cómo frenar
we will
el
hear Anna Ferrer, who
envejecimiento
will
a
tell
través de la
us
odontología. Y
how
para dejar a
you
todos
partner,
con buen
who is the
sabor de
medical
boca,
director of
queremos
the
terminar con la doctora Maripaz de Diago, que es experta en viticultura y
and
viticultura de precisión, y nos dará las claves para poder envejecer
Maria
como
Paz Diago Santa Maria, who
todo
is
esto.
a professor at the University of La Rioja,
Bastante
and
pluridisciplinar de este tema del envejecimiento. Esperamos
she
que
will
os guste mucho a todos vosotros y que podamos tener aquellos consejos que nos permitan envejecer mejor, tanto como personas
talk
como...
to us
Muchas gracias y doy de...
about on aging with this wonderful panel. Thank you very much for your attention, and let's start. Thank you. Who will actually start talking about today's Knowledge Day, and then we'll have some minutes for Q&A at the end. Okay, so we will have time for one or two questions for each panel member. And the first half hour will have three presentations that will talk about age welfare, that will talk about healthy aging. And as Vanya has just told us, Dr. Vanya de la Fuente will talk to us about healthy aging and where we're all heading to, because we're a society that fortunately we have a long life expectancy and we have to see how we can do it in a healthy way. Go ahead, Vanya, you have the floor. We can't hear you, Vanya. Can you hear me now? Yes, now we can hear you. Sorry about that. Well, I was saying that it is a great pleasure for me to be here with you today and to have a chance to share a few minutes talking about a topic that fascinates me, healthy aging. And I wanted to start my very short presentation by asking you a question to all of you, which is the following one, the one you see on screen. Are 70 years of age the new 60s? Please think for just 1 second about the answer you would give to this question. And I'm going to focus on this question in today's paper. And I'm going to tell you that the answer is no, but it could actually be. And this is what I'm going to talk about, as I've just mentioned. Okay, the scientific evidence we have points out that the rate of our life that we have in good health has been maintained. And this implies that we have additional years. In all regions of the world, healthy life expectancy at the age of 60, which in green is between 4 and 5 years shorter than the life expectancy, which is in purple. This shows that a lot of us, most of us, will spend about 25% of these additional years with ill health due to illnesses, multiple illnesses, and bad health in general. And this graph allows us to see something else, the enormous differences that exist between different regions of the world. Life expectancy and healthy life expectancy at the age of 60. We see that the number of years that you can expect to live beyond the age of 60 is 16.8 years in Africa and almost 21.8 years in Europe on the other extreme. We're talking about a difference of more than 5 years. And we also see in this graph a clear pattern between regions. Europe and the Americas, which have a life expectancy and a healthy life expectancy that's very long, and Africa, which is shorter. We have to remember this graph because people tend to assume that 70 years of age are the new 60s, and the extension of longevity has been accompanied by a long period of good health. And we will all agree that we do not just want to add years to our life. We do not just want to increase the purple bar. We want it to be accompanied by the green bar. We want to enjoy our years at the end of our life cycle with good health. And this is precisely what healthy aging is all about, to add quality to the amount of years. To invest in healthy aging is crucial in order to have all of the benefits of the aging of the population and our own individual aging processes. And I talk about our own aging process because we're going towards a world that's increasingly aged. A lot of the people who are here with us today, you will actually be around. You will be here at the age of, you'll be around at the age of 2050. And we will be 22% of the population. And this is what we see in this map, where we show the percentage of the population that will be aged 60 or more with regards to the total population in all countries in the world. In dark purple, we see the countries in which the rate of older people will be 30%, which, as you can see, includes Spain. But not only I wanted to point out which countries will have a percentage of older people over the total population. What I want to show with this map is that aging is a world reality. And in many countries, this demographic transition is occurring at a very fast pace, very quickly. Just to give you an idea, France had 150 years to adapt to a change from 10 to 20% the rate of the older people, whereas in places like China and India, they will have less than 20 years to do this adaptation. In addition, something else that has to be taken into account is that by the year 2050, 80% of aged people will be living in low-income and medium-income countries. And currently, there are no policies in those countries focusing on elderly people and aging. And that's why I argue that investing in healthy aging is important both for the generation of today's elderly people, as I showed in the first graph, and for the elderly people in the future, as I show this map as well. And how can we attain this? How can we achieve this healthy aging? Well, to start, we need to understand what healthy aging is all about. And when we talk about healthy aging, we're talking about the process of promoting and keeping the functional capability that allows us to be healthy whilst being old. And these are the skills, the attributes that allow us to do what we want, that allow us to be in good health when we are old. It goes beyond health. You will see this with the next slide. Here we see the functional capability. As you see below, it is composed of the intrinsic capability that each one of us has, the environment and the relationship we have with that environment. The intrinsic capability includes all of the physical and mental capabilities and skills that we have at some point. And in addition, this intrinsic capability predicts the health and welfare of elderly people rather than the illnesses that we will suffer from, which unfortunately is the current focus in our current system. Then we have the environment, which includes all of the factors in the context of our lives, our home, the institutions, the attitudes and values of society, which unfortunately nowadays are quite negative. There is a lot of negative thinking, cliches, prejudgments, and discrimination against other people or against ourselves as a function of our age. And this limits our opportunities and has an effect on our welfare. All of these elements, environmental elements, may affect health directly due to a number of obstacles and incentives that have an effect on our opportunities and behaviors. And let me give you an example for you to understand well the concept of functional capability and intrinsic capability. An elderly person, for example, could have an intrinsic capability that's limited because he or she has cataract that doesn't allow them to see. But if you have surgery, then he or she will be able to keep the main functional capability as if he did not have that limitation. But if the environment doesn't offer him or her that, for example, in many countries, it's considered to be blindness is something normal for an elderly person, and the person is not given the opportunity to have surgery, his intrinsic capability will also imply a functional limitation. And there are things that the elderly person will not be able to see, like reading a book or cooking. It is also important to think that diversity in old age is not random. What we have seen beforehand in the previous graph, it actually masks already existing inequalities. And we can also see differences between countries and within countries. We know that even though healthy aging starts with our genetic capital, it accounts for 25% of diversity in old age due to genetic factors. The other 25% is the result of the cumulative impact of our interactions with these physical and social environments that I mentioned beforehand, and they shape our behaviors and our exposures throughout life. Obviously, a lot of the opportunities and barriers that we face in our environments are highly influenced by personal characteristics like our gender or our genetic capacity. And that explains why women, in spite of the fact that they live longer years than women, we are marked by worse health status than men. And to promote healthy aging implies an integral response and to face these inequalities. And this is what's being pursued precisely with the decade of healthy aging of the United Nations. Working together, we'll be able to transform this aging and turn it into a unique opportunity to work to transform the world into a better place to age. I hope I've given you a global vision of what healthy aging is all about, and I also hope to be able to answer any questions you may have for me in this very short introduction to the issue of healthy aging. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you, Vanya. We have 1 minute to collect questions. And you also talked about the fact that there is a genetic component and an environmental component in aging. And given our perspective of European society, to which extent diet and stress condition our aging process? Is that something that you have studied or that you're planning to study? Yes, of course. Diet is a healthy diet has a big influence on a better aging. It's one of the factors that allow us to have that. But I would also ask what's behind being able to have a healthy diet. When I talked about these inequalities, I mean, it's not the same thing to have a healthy diet for somebody with high income or for somebody with lower income or a lower education level. It's important that when we think about the policies that help us reach a healthy aging, which inequalities exist and how can we approach them in order for us to all have a high quality of life and well-being that allows us to keep on doing what we value as we age, to exploit all of these enormous opportunities that are offered due to the longer longevity, which also imply having a better and a good health status. There are many, many people listening to you. Thank you very much indeed, Vanya. If you agree, we will hear our next speaker, Nuria Mas Canal. She's a professor of economics at ESA. And with Nuria, we will talk about the fact of living longer. What is the impact, the economic impact that this has on our health, but also on the health of our economy, so to speak. But that's her specialty. She is a researcher in the field of the economy of health. Welcome, Nuria. You have the floor. Good afternoon. Well, thank you very much indeed for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to share this panel with such wonderful panel members. And as you have said, I'm going to talk about population aging and the economy, its impact on the economy. And what I'd like to bear in mind, I'd like you to bear in mind, is what is most important for the sustainability of the welfare state. There are many things, but there are three significant elements. First, the structure of the population pyramid. How many people are of a working age compared to elderly people and children? The second very important point is these people who are of a working age, how many of them work? What's the ratio of employability? I mean, people who are of working age, they may not be working because they're studying, or because they're unemployed, or because they're taking care of people. And the third very significant element is these people who are of a working age, when they work, how much do they make? Do they have a good salary or not? Because if not, at the end of the day, it's important that a whole system is based on them. So let's combine this with the data we have about population aging. And this looks very much to Vanya's graph, but it's a bit different because I analyze people who are aged above 65. The percentage of people aged 65 years of or older, what's important here is to see this incredible increase in the indicator of people who will be older than 65 by the year 2050. And if we look at Spain and how our dependency relationship will be, the people we have who are older than 65 or children in comparison with people of a working age, after starting in 2050, it's considered that it's going to be more than 50%. And this will stress out, it will stretch the whole system significantly. It will stretch out the welfare state. If we look at a snapshot of how demography looks like in Spain, the two vertical bars are the population of our working age, and we are, by 2050, we are in black. I mean, this shows what this will imply for the sustainability of our welfare state. If we actually extend the retirement age, we still have a situation that's totally different from the one we have currently. In fact, if right now our welfare state system is quite stressed out, is quite stretched, you have to think that we're at a time in which baby boomers are at a working age, and this will change significantly during the next 30 years. So let's see what's the impact of these demographics on the three elements I've just mentioned. The first thing we will mention is the participation in the labor market. If you look here, first of all, I've said the demographics, you have seen how it changes. And then these people of a working age, how many of them actually work? In this graph, we have women on the top and men at the bottom. And as age increases, in black, we have the population aged between 55 and 64, their labor participation is reduced. And if we displace the population towards the right, not only we will have more people of a retirement age, but people of a working age will be at the outskirts where the ratio of people currently working will be decreasing. We can see exactly this in this context. In fact, the estimation we have according to the Bank of Spain is that the aging of the population that's estimated in the next few years until 2050, they will reduce their participation in the labor market 2.8 percentage points. The other significant aspect about this is our salaries. I mean, people who are working, how is it going for them? And this is related to productivity. And here too, we have different studies that tell us that if we are not accompanied with technological revolutions that are different from the ones we have now, the productivity will go down with age. And in fact, on the right-hand side, what you can see are the abilities of people, how they change with age. And below you have an estimate of the IMF about the impact of age on productivity. If productivity goes down, well, salaries will not actually be accompanied by this productivity decrease. And this will have an effect on public income. How does that look? Well, it looks like we will have more tensions. And where will we be able to find a solution? First of all, implications for the healthcare sector. First of all of the things I've shown you so far are static projections. We have to bear that in mind. All of this is true if we keep on doing things business as usual, as we have done them so far. If we change things, that will have an effect on the economy. So the solution goes through doing things differently. For example, in our healthcare system, we have to think that so at the end of the day, as I've said, for most people who are working, who are of a certain age, they have chronic diseases. But these illnesses do not need to be hospitalized. They can be served from home. Most of the population prefers to be treated from home. So far, I've talked about the care needs long term, 24 hours a day. Spain is in yellow. You see that this 25% of the population age 65 or more will need this healthcare. This could change. And the solution goes through having some new technologies. Here we see, for example, the clinic hospital in Barcelona. They have control towers to monitor the patients, and the results are very good. And that affects our health. This is a very significant change. And what does that do? Well, we have many tools to be able to monitor our results. To conclude, what does that imply? Well, whether in terms of improving our health or improving our productivity, new models of work, new business models. And we are working on a model of triple aim. We cannot only reduce costs. That doesn't make sense. What we have to do is to think about three dimensions. First, to improve the health of the whole population. I mean, with healthy aging, we have to have better care. Better care implies the care needed by a person when the person needs it and in the place where the person needs it. And thanks to that, we will be able to reduce costs. Thank you. Well, thank you, Nuria. We have time for one question. And the fact is, whilst listening to you, especially listening to you, I have a question. If we want to age in a healthy way, it is because we want to work longer. And I was also wondering, how does productivity drop? How does our health status affect our productivity? Of course, as we age, our brain also ages. But I reckon that an ill health also is connected to this drop in productivity. Of course, oftentimes it's difficult to know who comes first, the egg or the hen. On the right-hand side graph, I've shown that our capability or our ability to adapt to the new technologies is reduced. And this contradicts, well, this compares with experience, but we also have new technologies. Is it more difficult to adapt to them? If we have new technologies, productivity is kept. In that sense, there's an interesting element that comes from Japan. In Japan, Japan is a country that's most aged in the world at the moment. And over there, productivity per hour worked in Japan is it's much higher than the productivity per hour worked in the United States. What happens is that in Japan, given the characteristics of their population structure, well, there are a reduced number of people of a working age. But in fact, we can achieve a significant improvement in productivity. But that will imply the need to have a technological change. Thank you. I don't know if you can answer briefly. Are we seeing this productivity change in Spain? Are we on the right track? I wish I could say yes, Sylvia. That's the main challenge we have in Spain, not only in terms of healthy aging, but also to keep our welfare state. In fact, if you tell me what's the main point about the sustainability of the welfare state is to try that people work with greater productivity and work that improves productivity needs a better school system than the one we have currently, and also a good match between young people and the jobs we have. And slowly we are getting there. Well, hopefully we are on the right track. Thank you, Nuria. And now we will hear our third speaker of this first part, when we will talk about aging and health. We'll talk with Itziar Bergara, the scientific director of the Biodonostia Health Research Institute. Itziar works in the aging section, and she'll talk about what's the contribution that can be made from the primary care unit to a healthy aging process and to go all together towards a healthier aging process. Go ahead, Itziar, you have the floor. We can't hear you, Itziar. I don't know. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Sorry, so I couldn't find my mic to unmute it. I was sharing my screen and I got confused. Sorry about that. I think everything is fine. You can see my screen, right? Yes, excellent. Well, good afternoon. And I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity because I'm especially happy to be part of this panel and of these ex scholarship holders event. I have so much to thank La Fundación La Caixa in my professional life. And in addition to thanking you, it's a luxury to be able to make this paper after having heard the two people who have spoken before me because they have already talked about many of the things I wanted to share with you. I'm going to focus on some additional details. As Vanya has said, I want to talk about the functional capacity. In the field of geriatrics, this is a concept that has been used for many, many years. It's part of the body of knowledge of geriatrics, but it has been generalized to a certain extent thanks to the fact that it was conceptualized in the report published by the World Health Organization back in 2015, which surprisingly is the first report published by the WHO about aging in all of its history. And here indeed it described, we can see it on screen, what Vanya mentioned, the two components that make a person to function in his or her daily life. And it's to have a satisfactory life. This is a goal that we all want to keep right now at our age, and also when we become very elderly. The two clear components are our genetic capital, our lifestyle, the whole background we have in terms of illnesses, and that's the intrinsic capacity, and then there is extrinsic capacity. And an extraordinary example is that the functional capacity is not something that's static. It can be changed in time. And I'm going to give you an example where we see this mobility. Imagine an elderly person who lives on the ground floor of a home. He or she breaks a leg, but he or she can still go and walk out. If that person lives on the first floor and without a lift, due to this fall, his or her capability to walk would be suddenly broken up, and all of his daily capability would be broken. If we are able to put a lift on that building, that person could keep his or her daily lifestyles. These are extrinsic elements that are related to social responsibility and the social environment that gives a support to the functional capability from an extrinsic point of view. I'm going to dwell in this slide that comes from a report in which, as you can see, we point out different trajectories of the functional capacity. The one that's the blue line is the most successful trajectory. People who are able to keep their functional capability throughout their lives until they just all of a sudden stop. And these people end their life cycle with the sudden drop in their functional capability. The one that's a brown line, that's the most cerebral one, because these are people that from early stages in their life, they lose functional capability in a total way. And then the yellow group, they start like the blue ones, and all of a sudden it drops to the level of the brown. And after that, we have different scenarios. In some cases, we are fortunate to bring these people to the blue trajectory once again. Sometimes we improve it. They do not reach the blue line or they drop. These yellow ones are incredibly interesting because these are people in which we may intervene to do things, to make things change. And it responds to the fragile elderly person notion. In frailty in older adults, evidence for a phenotype. It's a complex issue, as we show on this slide, but the value brought about by the identification of this frailty in older adults phenotype is that people who, regardless of their illnesses, just because they have this phenotype, they are fragile, they have worse health results throughout time. That means that they died beforehand, but that's not important, really. The worst part is that they had more disabled years. They would be in hospital longer, and they had a greater consumption of resources and health services and drugs, and they ended up being regularly in elderly people's homes. As I'm telling you, this was published back in 2001. I mean, it is a newborn for the concepts in the field of medicine. And to us, it was terribly interesting from the point of view of primary care, because in our daily lives, in a primary health center, and I'm not there anymore because I'm fully devoted to research. In our daily life, we see patients that come in and we need to identify and work with them based on the functional capability idea, which, as I've said, is variable and it is determined by many factors. in the institute in which I work, which is now called Big Guipúzcoa, a few years ago, we defined an aging strategy and a research strategy with a study of the different disabilities in the past 10 years from this frailty phenotype point of view. We try to adapt our strategy to the different situations at the primary care unit. The first question we ask is inborn capability of that person. And then we have studied different lifestyles. What are the determinants of the family sphere, the social sphere, the neighborhoods that determines the functional capacity? And this is also a crucial element for primary care units because our health centers we develop our work in community environments. And during the last few years, we're working on a line directed to assessing the efficiency of the actions addressed to improving the functional capability and with tips to age better, to improve functional capabilities. And this is enormously determined by a good management of pharmacy to try and avoid situations as far as possible of having an aggressive pharmacological strategy and a good health pattern and exercise and good social relationship. And the importance that for all of these contexts to believe that all people need a social environment to open up communication and participation processes with the people affected so that amongst all of us we can start proposals, therapeutical proposals or interventions to improve their functional capability. Thank you. Well, thank you, it's here. Well, we have time for one question, and I have a question from the audience that I'm going to specify it a bit better with the things you have just told us. Somebody asked us about the effects. I was wondering, the different interventions you have mentioned talk about mobility and the welfare understood as something that's macro at a macro level, so to speak. But how this welfare, the fact that we reconduct these people and to give them this welfare or this well-being, how can this affect the development and the avoidance of prevalent illnesses like cancer, diabetes, and others? I don't know if you have any data about that. To us, the goal is rarely to exclude mortality. We're talking about people of a very high age. The biological limit of mortality, or rather of life expectancy, is very close to being attained. And what we're interested in is preserving, as Vanya said, to preserve a good functional level to reduce the level of disability throughout these last years of life. And indeed, the different actions addressed to one stays on Earth and the other one goes out to space. When the twin that goes out to space and as a result, what about to the effect of being in these extreme isolated conditions on the mind? All of these could generate illnesses that are typical of older ages. So all spatial agencies in the world have to a larger or lower extent a program that's defined, which is called RICHT: isolation and confinement, radiation isolation and confinement, distance to Earth, and gravity fields, and the hostile or closed environment. Now, there have been many missions from the International Spatial Station where astronauts have been there to see the impact under different points of view, but we had never been able to verify or to have a control sample that's very specific. And that changed a few years ago with the experiment, that the perfect experiment, which is related. It was conceptualized by the concept of the paradox, the twins paradox. We had the two Kelly twins from the USA. In addition to being individuals that were exactly equal with the same genetic capital, they had an environment, the life level had been the same one because both of them had been astronauts. And this created the perfect experiment in the sense that we have the control subject, which is Mark, who stays on Earth, and his twin brother, Scott, who goes to space. He went for 1 year to the International Space Station. I didn't, and he was there for 1 year. And in fact, he was the astronaut who had been longer out in space. Beforehand, during and after that visit, they were subjected to a number of tests to see how they had evolved and to see if the changes that had been seen in other astronauts were real, or, for example, it was just random and by chance, depending on each subject. There are a number of issues that are well known about the impact that being on space had. For example, in biomechanics, in in our bodily structure, typically astronauts, when they come back, they're a bit taller. They have grown a little bit. And this is due to the fact that given that there is no gravity, the spine can be extended and they tend to grow a little bit. And this is kept. This sounds wonderful, especially for lower people, but it's not a solution because it implies a number of joint pains. Another impact is the loss of bodily mass. This is obvious because there's a great change in the diet, and this comes back to normality when they come back to Earth. But what's most worrisome is the impact on the bone mass. 2 months in space implies 2 decades on Earth in terms of the degeneration of the bone mass, and it is not always recovered. In terms of genetics, we saw that both twins had suffered from variations in their genetic expressions, but Scots in space were totally compatible with trying to adapting to this more extreme environment. So this is very important because it allows us, or it will allow us, because of course this is still at an early stage, to identify the genes that are more sensitive and more resilient in space. At a molecular level, and we had a big surprise. We saw that the telomeres, which are a sort of envelopes that chromosomes have, and this can give us an indication of our age, because when we're younger, the envelope is bigger, and as time goes by, these envelopes become smaller. Scott, during the fly, in fact, they were extended, and here, well, gravity had something to do with it. But when he came to Earth, it was shorter, much more compared to his twin on Earth. And he had many cardiovascular problems. He had a swelling and an extension of the carotid artery. What happens if we are longer? That could imply significant cardiovascular conditions. Well, this is something we have to analyze to know whether we want to send somebody for longer on space. And with regards to his vision, there was a change in the eye shape. And given that there is no gravity, fluids behave differently, and our bodies are filled with fluids. Amongst the changes, between the changes of fluids and the production of different proteins to adapt to these new environments, that had a problem, implied eye problems that he did not have beforehand. In cognitive terms, i.e., his speech, he was quite well throughout the flight. They were kept. But we have realized that with time, after having come back, he has been losing his cognition a bit more than his twin on Earth. So, is it good or bad to go out to space? In reality, we are realizing that our body has strongly impacted by being out on space. And it is true that some people are more prone for these changes than others. And this is one of the great challenges for future space flights, to know how long we can be out in space. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you, Anna. And we also have a question for you. You have mentioned at some point which was the origin of it, but in general, maybe it's how you ask the question. When you see science fiction films, well, we see the typical spacecraft that starts spinning to create an artificial gravity. But we have other problems like radiation. Which are the solutions? I mean, by spinning over a spacecraft, can we keep our biology as if we were on Earth? And in terms of radiation, what do we know? To which extent can we actually extend our space voyages? Well, in fact, I believe, well, this is a bit distant from my expertise, but the impact of radiation, we do not know it well, because the problem is that we have not been long enough out in space to know it. So there will always be radiation. The moment we are out of our atmosphere, from a technological point of view, we will need to develop tools that protected us as if it were our atmosphere. We have a long, long way to go. We're not talking about going out to space and live in a spacecraft traveling around. The next missions will be out in the moon or Artemis, and in a few years in Mars. But the science fiction part, Interstellar, we'll have to wait for it a little bit longer. Well, thank you very much indeed, Anna. And we must take care of our planet because it's the only planet we have, and we have no plan B so far. Yes, so we can keep on exploring the space in the future, but we have to take good care of our planet. Thank you very much indeed. And now we will start about a different issue. We have with us Jose Maria Barrachina, who will talk to us about does our body age the same in its different parts? What happens with our teeth? What can we do with our teeth as we age? Thank you, Dr. Barachina. Thank you very much indeed. And I'd like to thank the Association of Scholarship Holders from Lancashire for inviting me to talk here. My paper will be very different, as you have said. The last one about outer space is wonderful. It's like having watched a science fiction film. In general, you will see that my paper is what I see in my dental office every day. You have to see a patient specifically and find a solution for each one of them. I would never start a paper without telling you where I come from. I come from a family of dentists, 4 generations of dentists, 22 dentists in 4 generations. And I feel very proud to say that all of my family has been devoted to the dental healthcare for a long time. This is the medical team in our office in Barcelona with my dad, my wife, my cousin, etc. So I'm going to focus my presentation. First of all, what happens in our teeth? What happens in our lips and our facial muscles? Changes in our bone structure. What can we do when we age? And here we see the evolution between the left-hand side, which is the mouth of a young person, and on the right-hand side, an older person. The first thing we see are the lips, how different they are compared with the right-hand side. They show, the amount of teeth shown by a young person compared to an elderly person, and especially the dental color. What happens with the color of our teeth as time goes by? Teeth are actually composed by different layers. Enamel, dentine, and the dentine takes greater volume and the enamel becomes smaller. And teeth start looking yellow. And everybody wants to have white teeth to look younger. And this is something that's relatively simple. We make a number of photographs to compare the before and the after. We apply a product, and what it actually does is to whiten the teeth. And in half an hour, we return the years that have gone through a patient just by applying a product, which is peroxide of cardamomo. This is quite simple. It is a treatment. This is a conventional treatment we do in our office on a daily basis. There are other cases that start becoming more complicated. Cases in which the teeth, patients who took tetracycline when they were younger and their teeth were yellow. To these type of patients, we can apply whitening treatments as well, or they need to use different dental folders. And this is another simple case with a whitening and a change and to do some touches on the teeth. This is what happens when we look at the teeth specifically. Something else that happens to teeth. Teeth are they are used up, the wear and tear, because of what we drink, Coca-Cola, because we lemon products. All of this makes the teeth to be aged. And sometimes people have a lot of sensitivity throughout the mouth. And when we take the models, we see different facets. Here we should have a dental anatomy with a number of features, but it's overly flat. In a very simple way, what we do, we manufacture what we call a discharge cell, which is perfectly adapted to the patient's mouth. And this is useful so that instead of wearing out his or her teeth, it wears out the plastic, and this will help us stop that process. In other cases, this is more severe, and it's not enough to have this plastic envelope. We have to return all of the things that have been lost. If you look here, all of the back teeth have lost their anatomy. They have lost their tops. So what we do is we make a few models, and in a lab, we put wax on it, and we reconstruct all of the things that we have lost on the way. And here we do it with a key, and we do it with ceramics, which is the most similar to the animal, and we apply it to the mouth. And in other cases, for example, in this case, this is from a previous case, these are highly round teeth. With some treatments, we have enlarged, extended the teeth, and we have renewed the patient's face. The patient looks younger. This is a multidisciplinary case. What happens with the lips and the muscles around the mouth? As we have said, lips have collagen. When we're young, the upper lip tends to be perfectly stretched, and we show very little our teeth. This is another case of a young patient. As we age, the collagen of the top lip is elongated, and that also happens with the lower lip. So what happens? Slowly, we see the lower teeth and not the higher teeth. What happens when we have a patient that wants to change his or her smile? We try to extend the top teeth for the teeth to be shown more so that the patient looks younger. This is the case of a patient of almost 90 years of age. She did not show her upper teeth. And finally, we have to talk about changes in the bone structure. We have known recently that the bones, our facial bones, grow throughout our lives. Oftentimes it was said, well, we will wait until you're 18 when growth stops, and then we will have an implant. I don't know if you ever heard that. In fact, it is never the right time. It's never a bad time, but the growth of the facial bones will occur throughout the life. There was a change in it will change in people. And if you have had, for example, an implant in your back teeth, in the past they were in contact. And this is due to the growth of the jaw bones. And there is a case in which teeth keep on going down, but the implant is there blocked. Our teeth for the whole of our life, but during our lives things happen. There are cases of ill position, teeth move, and this can be compensated and it can be corrected. We are able to correct teeth that are poorly placed. We have cavities. This is something that happens on a daily basis. Bacteria that with sugar, they eat up the animal. And then we have to clean up very well the cavity and close it with a composite. This is the case of a cavity that's a bit more complex. We actually rebuild the tooth walls. Pre-dental illnesses due to bacteria. We have to clean it up, and this is also on a daily basis. Teeth traumas. Things happen. There are fractures and breakages every day. Larger things that imply an orthodoncy, or cases in which there is no going back. Here the tooth has been broken, and nowadays we have ways of setting up an implant with surgery, and during the surgery we're able to put an implant and a crown. And with this, I've talked a little bit about all of the things that happen in our mouths during our aging process, and I thank you for your attention. We can't hear you, Sylvia. Sorry about that. My microphone was muted. Thank you very much indeed. And we have a question for you. You have told us a little bit all of the things we can do throughout our lives, depending on what happens to each one of us in our teeth. But you I was wondering if there is a recommendation as a professional from the point of view of a user and with limited resources, and maybe you do not want to be doing everything. What would you recommend? Is there anything you would actually prioritize in terms of processes, mobile processes, or implants? Do you have any recommendations that you could share with us? My general recommendation is prevention, prevention, prevention. You need to try and solve the problem before becomes unmanageable or too big. Patients should brush their teeth daily, and they should do flossing, and they should. I mean, we need personalized care, and we do need to take action before the wear and tear becomes too big, and we have to anticipate the problems and take action before they come in. Thank you, Jose Maria, and let's start with our last panel member. Last but not least, Maria Paz Diago. We love ending with a positive note. And we will talk with Maria Paz Diago. We'll talk about the scientific basis of a popular expression. I mean, to age like good wine. What is it? What is this all about? How does this aging happen in something that's not a human being, but a plant, wine? Thank you, Sylvia. I also wanted to thank you for a chance you're giving me. I'm very happy. I've learned so much from the people who have spoken before. Although it's true that I have devoted my life to wine, and I wanted to talk about the aging process of raisins. And well, it's almost dinner time. And to give a positive tone to aging, I mean, I'm going to focus on this. To age like good wine. To be able to understand what happens when wine actually ages. And in Spanish, we do not talk about the aging of wine. No, we talk about the growing of wine, how to accompany the wine for it to reach its full maturity. This is a linguistic phenomenon that I've always thought is very interesting. Let's try and understand what are the main components of wine. We have 84% of water, a 13% of alcohol, but basically these 3% of residual sugar, glycerol, aromas, and acids, which are crucial for this wine to be able to grow well. And of course, the phenolics. In fact, the phenolics, as I've said, this 3% is, as English people say, they mark the difference. And this allows us to define the quality of the wine as it ages. And when we talk about a crianza, i.e., to grow a wine, we have to distinguish between oxidative crianza or reduction crianza, which happens in the absence of oxygen or with very little oxygen. And this happens in the bottle. Typically, once the oxidative maturity has happened. Let's start with the aromas. There are more than 250 oil ring molecules with complex interactions that are difficult to understand. And traditionally, we have classified them into 3 types: primary aromas that come from the vine, supplementary ones, the ones that happen during the fermentation, and tertiary or third aromas that happen during the crianza process. I don't want to actually bother you or bore you with these chemical details, but given that I've studied chemistry, allow me to share my knowledge with you. Here you have all of these families of compounds, of aroma compounds that are present in the vid, and that gives aromas to green pepper, flowers, vegetation, etc. We also have other types of fruits, others that are less pleasant, like cat being that happens in Verdejo or Sauvignon. During the fermentation of these compounds, they progress, they are transformed, and this gives rise to other families that also have this type of aromas like tropical fruits and sometimes like soap. And finally, what will happen in we have the extraction of the wood itself in the barrel due to oxidation processes, and then we will have these coffee, dry nuts, cocoa, or coffee aromas in the wooden barrel. But we also have phenolic compounds that are crucial as well. And here within these phenolic compounds, we have the non-flavonoids, out of which we have trans resveratrol, which is the best known one. But the most important ones that I want you to look at are the flavonols. The flavonoids, which belong to this group, we have three types of flavonols. Flavonols, which belong to an antioxidant activity, and they have an effect on the wine's color, flavin 3-OLS. This is very important because they will be the precursors of the so well-known tannins. And they're responsible for the different feelings in the mouth, the structure, the essence, and finally, only in red wine, the anthocyanins, which give it their color. So what happens with tannins? Tannins, well, there are the two types of tannins. The ones on the right-hand side, they are condensed. They are the ones formed based on flavonols with an A that I mentioned, and they are present in the vine. During the aging process, these tannins will be growing in their size due to polymerization, the adding of units one after the other, forming very long chains, and this will have a simplification, will have an implication in the mouth effect. The tannins will be extracted starting with the contact with the wood in the barrel. So here I'm going to show you a model of what happens in the barrel. The first thing that happens is the entry of oxygen, and that's why we talk about an oxidative maturity through the cork and through the pores of the wood that, depending on their origin, American, French, or from different forests from where they come, the size of the pores could be more or less big, and more or less oxygen will come. And this oxygen will allow the ethanol to leave. Now, the first thing we will obtain in this process of maturity, of oxidative maturity, is the astringency, greater ruggedness in the wine, and different types of aromas, tertiary aromas, that give all of these aroma nuances to the wine. And if we are not overly careful and the barrel is not clean enough, we will also have non-desirable factors with aromas like leather or horse due to the appearance of Brettanomyces that are non-desirable. These are non-desirable yeasts. And the final phenomenon in the barrel is a product of the oxidation. In other words, oxidation as a phenomenon that stems from the contact with the oxygen. And here we have a very significant reaction. And I would like to bore you with so many chemical formulae, but this compose, and that's why it's called a phenol, this aroma group with an OH group, they turn into quinones as a result of their contact with oxygen. And this has a double-fold function. First of all, the appearance of quinones will imply a change in the color. Thus, wines tend towards light or orange or gray color as they age, red wines, that is. And on the opposite side, white wines, due to the appearance of quinones, is that they go from a lighter color towards a darker yellow color. The second phenomenon of the appearance of quinones and oxidations is, as I've said beforehand, all of these tannins, in the case of red wines, they will become stable complexes that can be stable if they reach an average size. And this helps to trace the participation red color and to improve the astringency, i.e. the perception in the mouth. But what happens if this keeps on polymerizing and adding new tannin chains? Well, at the end, these compounds are not soluble in the wine and they precipitate. And in addition to the precipitation product, we have a loss of color and therefore a reduction in the astringency. In addition, as a result of that, we reduce the acidity as well due to the formation of these compounds. They go from acids to asteroids, and the change, well, the perception in the mouth changes. In the barrel, due to these precipitations after times due to the tannins, it is softened. We soften that structure, that initial power that the young wine had when we introduced it. And finally, and this is my last slide that I want to share with you, is that what happens inside the bottle? Well, inside the bottle, as we have said, it is a reduction environment. In other words, there is no oxygen, but there's a little bit of oxygen in it. And we illustrate it here very well in this slide. And it's the fact that when you give a wine as a gift, if you have a chance, try for it to be in a magnum size, 1.5 liters and not 3/4 of a liter, which is most of it. Because the wine, when you bottle it, it is already ready for its enjoyment. And if we look at the initial stages with this red balls, these light red balls, 5, 7, 10, or 15 years, look at how the presence of a greater surface of contact with the oxygen in this volume compared to this one will make the wine to be kept much better and to be able to enjoy it longer. That's all I wanted to share with you this afternoon. And above all, after all of these aging processes we have heard about, I know that wine has a double-fold vision with regards to health, but in a moderate way, I believe. I don't know whether they will make us healthier, but surely they will make us wine will make us happier. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Mary Paz. We have a question for you. You talked about the aging of wine, and in a larger bottle, you have said wine ages better. And we wanted to know, following your initial idea, although you have told us more about the aging of wine in itself, what's the effect of vineyards, the origin of the vine, and the aging of the wine? And I mean, and I'm referring, well, I mean, if the vineyard is older or not, and maybe also the type of vine. Could you give us some data about that? Yes, indeed. Traditionally or lately, we have revisited the concept that an old vineyard gives a better wine. This is a mantra, like the mantra that the smaller the production, the better the wine. No, this is an oversimplification of what we need to do. Vineyards are like people. They have a capacity to generate, to produce, depending on its capacities then. An old vineyard, what is actually true is that they have more wood, greater capacity to have a reserve of carbohydrates during the winter. And these products mature better because the production they have is smaller. However, there is a phenomenon, a current phenomenon, which is the one that I wanted to mention during the first part of my paper, is the phenomenon of the illnesses of wood, of the wood. Not Phyllosteria, because it's not a microorganism, but it's a number of fungi that are attacking vineyards due to different factors for which there is no cure. And the only method we can apply is prevention, to prevent especially issues like cropping and pruning. We have to go back to the ancestral practices in the area of Jerez, for example, with a careful handmade pruning and because we're destroying the vineyards. Age-old vineyards, the way we prune them, they will never reach the age of 100. But there are many cases of vineyard strains that if they are well pruned, they can reach a very, very old age. Well, it is 7:15. So in addition to thanking you for these wonderful papers and these excellent and very interesting presentations, we also thank you for being so punctual. You have been very punctual. And with this, we end this scholarship, this Knowledge Day devoted to aging. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as we have, like the team of the scholarship program that have been listening to it. It has been incredibly interesting. Thank you all participants, and I thank all of the ex-scholarship holders who work in different fields related to aging for sharing your knowledge. Thank you very much indeed. And I hope to see you in the next Knowledge Day and to see you again all. Thank you very much indeed, and see you soon. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.